Rob Limtiaco is a traditional canoe carver and a pillar in the seafaring community of the Pacific. His voyaging experiences have given him valuable insight and life lessons. And in this conversation, we talk a little bit about his experiences in Polowot and the education process, the traditional education process he received there, and compare that with contemporary or Western models of education. Enjoy. Education is like a voyage. My 20-year journey through education has been filled with enthusiastic students, inspirational teachers, incredible places, and life-changing events. Along the way, I've made new friends, learned effective strategies, I've built tools that have helped me in my profession and in my life. I'm Matt Limtiaco. I'm a professor of education, and I hope to share some of what I've learned with you. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here with my uncle Rob Limtiaco. It's a pleasure to see you, Rob, and just great to touch base again. Every time we talk, it's a pleasure, and to be able to share that conversation with others, especially in the context of education and where we might kind of rethink that is it's an honor. So thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Hey, it's good to be with you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So I thought, I thought I'd write down some of these questions just to make sure that to some degree I stay on track, because I know that we can go off track easily and get into interesting tangents, which that might be a good thing. But just for the sake of making sure that we honor people's time that might be watching this in the future, I'll do my best to kind of keep myself in check. Does that sound all right with you?
Sounds good. That sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay, so the first thought, I thought we'd just talk a little bit about how we got together to craft that Detours Guahan article a ways back, and
Okay.
kind of that idea of Western influences on education in the Pacific, and sort of the differences between that Western education style and maybe sort of the ways that traditional knowledge transfer is really different from that. And I think a big part of that conversation, and we were talking about this earlier, that, you and I spoke for really, that one article sort of is captured in the space of, a 2 or 3 hour conversation out on the beach together while we're watching the sunset. But in reality, it really was a conversation that took, months to unfold. And so, maybe if you could speak a little bit to that idea, that different idea of sort of the immediacy and that specificity of Western education and sort of goal-oriented, as opposed to sort of maybe a more organic feel that one might experience when engaging in a more traditional transfer of knowledge.
Yeah, well, I'm here in Hawaii right now. I was invited actually to the conference that addresses the iBook Detours information and resources digitally for teachers, and that was at UH Manoa, and I really didn't. I was amongst a lot of PhDs, so the brightest of the bright, and what they're pursuing speaks to what you're talking about, is going back and looking carefully at how to impart some of these ways of thinking. And I really didn't have anything to say during the conference. I did contribute a little bit, and it just simply the manner in which I learned seafaring and some aspects of navigation. And as the conference unfolded, especially particularly on the last day, it just boiled down to really letting people know that these things really take time, and you have to give your time and be with somebody in order to teach some of these ways of traditional thinking through traditional practices. Specifically, in my case, sailing, and it just takes time. So the principles are pretty simple, and they're nothing new. I mean, it's true for all, I think, all cultures, especially when you go back. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, but it's essentially like, I do it, somebody's with me, and they're watching me. That's the second step. First step, I do it. Second step, somebody's with me, they're watching me. Third step is basically I'm letting someone else do it, that person, and I'm watching them, guiding them, encouraging them. And this happens over a long period of time. Fourth step is they're doing it on their own. Fifth step is they're doing it, someone new is with them, and I'm out of the picture. So this is a way of teaching and imparting values, but also skills. But I think more importantly, it's really the value system. And that also comes down to some pretty simple principles, and that is making what's important to them as important as they are to me. So when I spend time with somebody, I have to evaluate myself and go, you know what, I'm imparting something important to them, adding value to them. So I really have a life in my hand. In the case of actually going out to sea and taking care of somebody, that's what it comes down to, is you're responsible for someone else's well-being. And that takes a lot of care, and it's really pretty simple. It comes down to love, you know. And that's easy to talk about, but to show it is a different story, and it just takes a lot of time.
It's interesting. The steps that you described are very, if you read this in a teacher's manual, they would be, you know, their textbook, you know, that sort of, first I'm gonna show you, and then you're going to do it with me, and we're going to do it together, and then you're going to do it on your own. I mean, that's very much, you know, I'm not going to go there and say it's a modern day way of teaching, because obviously that's been around a lot longer than some of these, you know, resources I'm talking about. But what I think might be a little less apparent in the classroom, and I think a lot of that comes down to time and also priorities, is that what you're describing in terms of that caring and love. And not to say that teachers don't want to go there. I think that every teacher that I've ever known that's gotten into the industry got into the field because they wanted to, you know, share compassion for youth and be there for young ones and be a good mentor and enjoy that bonding and opportunity to grow together. But I think that some of the priorities that we're faced with as educators are sometimes prohibitive. You know, we don't get to do that as much as we'd like. Obviously, those kinds of lessons and passing on those kinds of things are really essential when you're talking about something going on a canoe, because it could be life threatening, really, if you're not building that kind of trust. Can you speak a little bit to that sort of notion of building trust and the time it takes, and what kinds of activities, when you were in your mentorship, did you you know, go through to sort of build trust among your mentors and also, you know, fellow crew?
Yeah, well, before we visit that, let me just backtrack a little bit and say that you know, teachers, I've had some in grade school that I can remember, some in high school, and the ones that I remember, it all came down to character, you know, and a gifted person that really has the best interests of someone in mind, especially in, you know, because I came into the Western type of educational system. They make great impacts. They really do, and there's a lot of value to the system if the character is there in the person, and they really do care about the students. And I felt that from some of my teachers. But just to address what you just talked about, I'd have to go back to the examples that my teachers set as I was coming up in school, and then also in my training in carving and sailing. And that would come from primarily Rapui Alaware, Master Navigator Rapui Alaware from Polowot, and who taught me the values and the ways we should conduct ourselves on the canoe. And also Tawa Tilamor, my instructor in carving. Now, both these gentlemen, they followed a well-developed system, largely based on natural principles. If you do this, so and so is such and such is going to happen. It's just a matter of fact. And so those things were implanted in me, and I didn't really get to recognize that or practice that until much later on. In fact, quite recently, as you know, because you've been out on it quite a few times, I have a little 11-foot canoe. I keep it real simple. We went out in the reef line, and it's very shallow. It's safe. And I learned this from Rapui because I had asked him when I sailed with him up to Guam and then from Polowot and then back again. I did ask him, what was your first experience sailing on your own when you became a navigator? And he said, well, I sailed from Polowot to Chuk. And I said, well, how was that? And he goes, I was afraid. And I was quite shocked and surprised. I said, but you knew everything. You had your teacher, Angora, had released you and said, you're ready, go on your own. He goes, no, you don't understand. I knew I could make it, but now I had lives in my hand. I was responsible for people. And what was I to say if somebody got hurt or lost their life when I go back home? But he qualified that. And he said, once I made it to Chuk and back to Polowot, he said, I was much more confident because now I knew I could care for people and I knew my way. So yeah, it just takes time, and sometimes you don't realize it until you're much farther down the line. And for me, and you were there, it was taking children out on that same canoe. And I knew each time that I took them out that, I essentially had a life in my hand. And I had to be very careful, not overly careful, but really aware of what I was doing, because at first, taking all these kids out and adults too, I didn't want anything to go wrong. But as soon as we're out there and we're connecting and the wind is nice, just kind of like how this is unfolding now, we wait for the right tide and the wind is good. Okay, let's go. And then we're having fun. And then all of a sudden, all that experience, all that time kicks in and you just start enjoying yourself, And the joy for me now is really to see the joy on other people's faces. If they're enjoying themselves, then I'm enjoying myself. I don't go out alone much anymore, simply because I've done that a lot. But when it comes to others, and let's put that in an acrostic, offering the help, especially regarding spiritual success, which is just joy, imparting the love, and you get it back because you see the smiles on their face. So it's like CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but I replace that with connection, process, and relationship. When you establish those things, something happens, and it's the same in your profession, as I have learned, as our personal relationship has unfolded. That's been a joy for me. So I've received value from you, learned things that I didn't know, because my world is not in academia, but there's certainly a connection. And I think, it's been a win-win. We've both benefited equally. I know there's a lot of balance here, Matt. So I enjoy talking to you. You tend to bring out things that I don't think about, or realize. And that's the educator in you, and in large part, I attribute that to your character. So, and of course your skills as an educator. So I never thought about these things this way, but it's a good thing that this has happened, and I enjoy talking about it, and hopefully this will benefit your students and teachers in the future.
I appreciate that, and vice versa. I mean, just as I was listening to you, it just sounds the parallel you can derive from that that statement of hey, when you've got someone else's lives in your hands for the first time, it's scary. And I know a lot of brand new teachers. In fact, I talk to my students a lot before they go off and teach for the first time. And I say, what's your biggest fear? Because I want to help you with that. I want to quell any fears you got, and I want to help you just understand the lay of the land. That what are you going to meet up with? And some of them say, well, I'm a little nervous about dealing with parents, because I just don't know how to. I think I know how to talk to kids. I'm just not sure how I'm going to talk to the parents. And I talk to them about that. Always making sure that it's you really let those parents know that we're a team on this together, and that we're working towards the same goal. And I think parents respond to that. But one of the time and time again, one of the things students say, and every time I ask this question, at least in almost every class, at least one student or more says, I'm really nervous because I'm going to have all these students in a room all by myself, and I'm going to have their lives in my hands. And, I mean, what if I do something wrong, or what if I mess up? And I said, we're giving you all the tools that you're going to be using, and you will mess up here and there, but hopefully you don't go too far off track, and hopefully you don't steer off too far, because you've gotten a lot of training and you've gotten a lot of experience mentoring with master seafarers in the schools, the other teachers, because they have that period of time where they get to work with during student teaching internship. So they work with a master teacher, and we choose those teachers specifically because they are so good and so giving. And but the parallels are, it's interesting to listen to that idea that Rapui during that time was so nervous, because this was the first time where he had his own classroom, right? And he had to bring those people safely across. And I think that's when you step up to the plate as a teacher. That's a really it's an intimidating time. But once you have had a few of those sails under your belt, have achieved greatness, time and time again, and learned from mistakes, you become sort of a natural and gifted teacher, and you don't shudder at the idea of going into class every day and being responsible for the lives and the education of those kids. And I'm wondering, in terms of just building, because a lot of what we do as teachers also is build collaboration, and we try to foster connection between our students, and just bringing kids together, because and any teacher worth their salt will tell you this, that there is no managing a classroom if you don't have the students working together as a team and working with you, because you can't do it all yourself anyway, right? You have to have them taking on responsibility. And I'm wondering, on the canoe, whether it's on the canoe or even on land, preparing for a voyage, or just training, or doing the things that it takes in order to get yourself prepared and contribute to the community of seafarers. How would you describe sort of the collaboration between people and the roles people, are there specific roles that people adopt, and or rules they adhere to, or those kinds of things that also might be an interesting parallel to the classroom, like responsibilities, or just ways of connecting and working together and cooperating?
Well, the context in which I learned was an established society made up of different clans, and uh, and so each clan, all the training needed to go out on a canoe. Say, for example, a large canoe was, I mean, those things had already been established. So different clans could borrow for, you could get different people on one canoe, but each canoe, each clan has a canoe and a canoe house. So that in itself is a classroom and everybody has learned their roles well when they go out on there. But it's like a family. I mean, you go into a classroom. I remember from grade school, I'd be so nervous going the first time going into a classroom. But as the year went by, you learn everybody's names, your teacher, and most of the time, the teachers really cared about you. They wanted you to succeed. Um, and the dynamics of a classroom, you have to get to know people, but once you do, and you have a favorite class. We all had a favorite class. Well, that's what it is on the canoe. It's like you're always your favorite class, where you're supported. You don't face the world alone, and everything is us and ours, and taking care of each other. And yes, each particular sailor is known for perhaps doing something fairly well, and the navigator, the teacher of that canoe, recognizes that and encourages that, and has them play out their roles when you're out there, and so others get to learn and observe and hone their skills in areas they may be weak in. And the navigators, the good navigators, in my case, Rapwi, he could recognize somebody that perhaps didn't have as much experience, and really nurture that person, encourage them, and make them feel as though they were the greatest sailor on the canoe, no matter the roles that they played. So I just think, in my experience on the canoe, that's how things unfolded. And then, of course, my experience coming up in schools, I always remembered the teacher that cared for probably what would have been the weakest student. In some cases, that was me.
Yeah.
And so I may not have passed the class with a good grade, but that teacher made me feel as if I was a straight A student with 4 gold stars all the time. And boy, that some of those experiences have really made an impact on my life. Builds up confidence, and tells you, you're worthwhile. You are worth a lot. You have a lot of value, and boy, there's no better feeling than a teacher giving you that. That's a real gift.
It's interesting how you said, that I may not have made the best grades, but I still felt like I had achieved something great, and I think that
Yeah.
that's really an important thing to have. Something I think I learned a little later on, but I really appreciated it once I understood how unimportant grades were. That
Yeah.
they're important for their own thing. It is important to have some kind of a gauge for, hey, these are some areas that are strengths, and these are some areas that are challenges for me. And so I'm going to need a little extra help with division of fractions, or maybe I'm going to need a little more help with multiplication, or geez, my spelling's kind of suffering. This is a place
Yeah.
where the parents can help you out, but they're not badges of honor. They
Mm.
are merely measuring devices for probably the least important aspect of what goes on in school, and that's that relationship building. That's those social skills, that those abilities to those what we call now soft skills, but it's just life skills of how to communicate, how to be a part of something bigger than yourself.
Mm.
And you also mentioned that idea that um, which I really appreciated, and I hope that in the work that we've done together on the workbook, that we help to foster in classrooms, because I know teachers appreciate it, but that idea that you're not in this alone. And I think that we've done a lot to in Western schools to institutionalize this idea of aloneness. Your grade, your achievement, your
Yeah.
trajectory, the college you will go to, the job you will get, you know,
Yeah.
the accolades and the honors you receive. There are relatively few uh, group achievements, you know, that one might, you know, look to as, hey, let's do a group achievement, you know, or what did team A do that, you know, that was so outstanding and achieved. And the truth of the matter is we accomplish so much more. And the big things that we accomplish are always with other people. And
Yeah.
so I appreciated that you mentioned that on the canoe you do feel like you are not in this alone. And I think that maybe perhaps students feel that way, that there is this sort of feeling of aloneness. And part of that, I think, is the emphasis on grades,
Yeah.
as opposed to the emphasis on collective good and collective learning and just even becoming friends.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. As you were speaking, I was thinking about, when we first met, we were going out on the canoe, talking, having these really good conversations. And, I had asked you, I said, what do you want from me? And it came
Yeah, I
down
remember
to,
that.
yeah, it came down to the, hey, Rob, I want to invite you to a Zoom. My students are going to be presenting. And I was still, it's like, in my mind, it was a Polaroid as to what you were trying to accomplish. But when I went on that Zoom and your students presented, what impacted me so greatly is they were working similar to how a crew on a well-managed canoe with a good navigator, how they conduct themselves. It was such a good presentation. It was so obviously good that these individuals had thought this out. We're passing to each other when one individual finished presenting, and now so and so will present. That is similar to how a good crew acts on a canoe, and you have that coordination, you have that understanding of what you're dealing with, the elements, the subject matter, the context. And that at the end of that, I don't know if you remember, but I said, well, whatever you're going to do, Matt, count me in, because the Polaroid was becoming clearer, and obviously what your objective was is just simply to add value to others. So it was obviously something that I was privileged to be a part of. And I didn't think I would ever be a part of that. And it's unfolded in a way that it is really, there's a lot of blessings in that. So it's what you're talking about is teachers that play such an important role, um, are giving to individuals, in terms of their self-worth and what they have to offer this world. And it's really, I'm not in your lane, but what you're doing it's extremely valuable. And that's what we do in our world is, we know we're going out at some point. So we want to impart, maybe not the skills in everybody, but certainly the importance, some intrinsic value of how we conduct ourselves with others. And that's what it comes down to, that one word, others.
That so that I remember that presentation, and that was the presentation where this was really kind of the birth of this idea. You know, we had created, you know, the film He Va'a He Moku He Moku He Va'a that kind of looked at, that really expanded on canoe values and how in Hawaii those canoe values might be potentially utilized in a classroom. And this was, you know, my attempt to have students in Guam really look at their canoe values and think about those same values and how their classrooms And they're no different. These values are very similar. They're human values.
Yeah.
Of course, they're in a different language, but Chamorro language as opposed to Hawaiian language. But the ideas are they're very transferable, and so that was sort of our first attempt at building tools that help students think about their life in a classroom, sort of like they would think of their lives on a voyage, and then use that idea to build better friendships, to act with one another the way they might act if they were, they're not going home at the end of the day. You're going to be with that person for a whole year. And that's a long voyage. And so what kinds of behaviors might you like to expect from yourself and from others? What goals might you like to achieve with others? What understandings might you have with those others that will help you achieve those goals? And we drew from Dr. Shinhwa Lee some counseling help, and that's really what got the ball rolling on this idea of a Voyager state of mind, and that the workbook that we created together, and thinking about using actual real life authentic experiences and having those be examples of ways of being, so that the students do that. And yeah, that's been a really incredible experience to be, writing with others that can now contribute, not just the conversation expanded out from you and I to now inviting others to contribute their stories, and the story of Ray Flores, and just being able to control one's breath and control one's heart rate and sort of energy relates exactly to counseling theory, where how the breath is so important, and just if you're in a heightened state of stress or even panic, just regaining your breath and focusing in on your breath really just helps to bring down that level of anxiety. And I also really appreciated the article on giving to others who you weren't even with the food production and along the way, and the author of that. I also really appreciate the author deciding to be anonymous, and just sort of that humble aspect of just saying, hey, I want to share these ideas, but I really want to honor. I don't want to take that credit. I want to honor the people that came before me, my teachers, and even that whole conversation just, I think, really spoke to I think that sort of ability that the canoe community teaches one. And I think that can exist in a classroom, those kinds of traits and those kinds of behaviors. And I think that's what we were trying to accomplish when we use these examples, these real life examples, to share with students. This is how you calm yourself down, or this is how you give to others, or this is how you work as a team, and allowing that example from the canoe community to really help influence and give students something to strive for themselves, and maybe even get involved in the canoe community.
If you want to, everything you just talked about, I can summarize and very, very quickly in the canoe world, in the navigation world. I was just in Chuk last month to visit family, and also I had the privilege of visiting a school there called the Koi Koi, which is run by a gentleman named Clark Graham. The first wave of Peace Corps workers to go out to Micronesia, their home base was Chuk, and then they sent them out to the outer islands. He's the founder. His daughter Kimberly Graham now runs the school, and it really comes down to, if you want to go up yourself, you got to give up and sacrifice. And So I was talking to Clark about this, but I was also talking to my relative in Chuk and a friend, and he was on a voyage. He's from Polowot. He was on a voyage from Polowot to Chuk, and the reason they went on this voyage, he was quite young at the time, is there was a youth that had missed the ship that was going to take him to Chuk, and he was on his way to go to a college in Hawaii. So basically, a navigator, their relative, said, "Come on, we're going to take you." And they went on a canoe, and that's not easy. That's a potentially dangerous voyage of 150 miles. And we were talking about this, talking about the navigators, that generation of people who embodied all these values we are talking about. And it said, he said, he said it so well. He goes, today, with regard to learning these skills, navigational skills, sailing skills, carving skills, he said, nobody wants to suffer because it's hard. Life is just difficult. And, we have a lot of things that make life easy, and people want it fast and quick. And there's so much change. It's accelerated. And, here I am in Kona, and I'm going around, and this is a kind of removed from the fast pace of Oahu, but I can still see the stress on people's faces because of what they're facing across the board, and so what you're speaking to, and what teachers do and can do with these place-based values and principles is really impart care and gentleness and kindness in their teaching. At the same time, emphasizing discipline. It just takes a lot of hard work. But the humanity that teachers bring into the classroom, that cannot, oh boy, we can't overemphasize or estimate the impact on the lives of people with regard to that, because everything has changed. There's so much fast-paced change now. And it's hard to downshift from that, but I believe what you're emphasizing here speaks to that. And like you said, you want to train and impart that to students you're teaching so that they can bring that into the classroom and make a difference.
What you're describing, I think there's sort of a yearning, and I don't think I'm exclusive on this. I think there are a lot of people out there, and especially a lot of teachers, that are really yearning for that connectedness, between them and their students. And
That's a good word.
yeah,
Connectedness.
Not wanting to lose that battle to cell phones, or to the multitude of other priorities going on in our kids' lives. And it does seem like it has expanded exponentially, even in the last 10 years, and maybe even more so over the course of the pandemic. But
Yeah.
I think that part of this, this work that we're doing together, along with Dr. Lee and Jess Merrill, and all these fantastic people who have contributed to just building this school, and just thinking about education differently, I think comes from this place of that it is so prevalent and just necessary, and comes to life on the canoe. And that is this idea that, that hard work, that connectedness, taking time to get to know each other. There's something about that process that really brings out that best human quality. I'm wondering, I honestly feel like we're just scratching the surface, but I see a lot of other groups really doing very similar kinds of things. And I'm really glad to see sort of a pivot away from the direction of, let's go full bore into, getting humans out of the equation or whatever, the direction that education, was going in full steam ahead, just, forgetting about the human aspect, I think, of learning and being connected. I see a pivot coming back and a lot more emphasis. And really, I think COVID had a lot to do with that on social emotional support. We really have now uncovered how important it is. It's a talking point now that we were working on before COVID happened, and now I see it being a top topic, which is, I think that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
we're just scratching the surface. Where do you hope some of this kind of work might go in the future? Just in terms of just exposure to canoe values, human values, but canoe values, and also some of the lessons that are so well captured by the canoe. What are your thoughts about the future of education, life, the canoe community, that kind of thing? Do you have any hopes or visions or thoughts?
Well, I think what you're doing with the workbook, you're just spot on. Place-based learning, social emotional support, and then as a result of the Detours article, which you were instrumental in putting together. I mean, I told the story, but I can't forget the fact that you gave me the first draft. And remember, I'm sure you do, it was limited to 1,000 words, and I think it was a day or two. We talked, and you said, here's the first draft, and it's exactly 1,000 words. Well,
pure luck, pure luck.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like, that's a skill, man. I mean, it's like engineering. It's like, a pilot, right? You want the good pilot in the driver's seat doing certain things, man. So I'm about to go back. I want that.
Every single word worth. I had to get every single word worth in there.
Yeah. And the pilot that's going to fly my plane, I want him to get me back home because I'm ready to go back home. But getting back on track here, the conference that I was invited to as a result of you putting together that essay is going into the Detours resource book, which is available free of charge to teachers digitally. And so what I realized is the folks there, yourself included, you would be in that lane, is they are trying to obviously learn more about indigenous practices and ways of thinking and learning, and make that available to teachers. And I didn't realize this. I said, what you are doing here is they asked me for my input. I said, the most important thing you can do is connect people. Wonderful thing about this technology that we do have is you can connect. I mean, look at us. You're in Vermont. I'm in the Big Island. And I'm just amazed at the potential that this has for good. And we know there's a lot of bad things on this kind of platforms,
right?
But there's equally as much good. And your profession, teachers, educators, are moving in that direction to